Invincible is a series that doesn't hold back on showing us the true nature of what it's like to live in a world with superpowered people. From Viltrumites and superhumans to just random aliens or beasts themselves, one thing in common with all of them and their exuberating strength is death. No matter how strong you become, the thought that death may one day consume you is inescapable. So here today, I've decided to cover all of the deaths inside of the amazing world of Invincible and all of their visceral nature. Usually when I do an all deaths video for a specific series or something, I try to explain the basics of how it led up to each death with an in-depth narration of their last few moments. However, just due to the overwhelming number of deaths that happen throughout the story, I will go over, say, more of the fodder, early or just uninteresting deaths in less detail, saving the longer narrations for the more intense, climactic and world-changing ones. That being said, of course subscribe if you are new around here and haven't already, as it really helps in pushing my content to a bunch of new amazing people. Plus leave a like and help in pushing this video to 5k likes, as it shows that you all want more videos just like this. Kicking things off though, and during the first arc, Family Matters, things start off kinda chill. David Hiles, a man we learn about through flashbacks, was shown trying to murk Mark and Eve. In an attempt to kill them both, he turned himself into a bomb. However, after Mark grabbed his ass and threw him into the air, he exploded and subsequently died, Kermicide style. The next three deaths in the series, which include Todd Jefferson, were due to our previous villain David exploding them in the past. Moving forward, and after those four, Robot blew up a golem-like creature during the fourth volume of the series. In the same issue, the son of David Hiles, an unnamed man, committed Kermicide off-screen. However, it was only mentioned in a passing conversation, so we never actually saw it. Sticking with the same line of murking yourself and leaving the earthly realm, in the sixth issue, one of the earlier reaniman that was, created, couldn't handle life and threw itself onto a sundial to end its sad existence. Now, next up we have what I like to call one of the most infamous bloodbaths in modern animation. Issue 7, or the final parts of episode 1, left almost everyone who hadn't already read the series with their freaking mouths gaping. Before we got to the good stuff though, a few fodder losers had to kick the buckets. The first of these was Midnight Magician, a man who was mentioned to have invited himself to the Shadow Realm 3 years prior to the current date. Stone Warrior was then beaten off to literal death by War Woman and her club, and a random alien creature was killed when Green Ghost went full Ant-Man in the man's anarch and destroyed the dude from the inside out. After then calling all of the Guardians to the Utah base, Nolan decided to start his own devious plan. And between him starting his plan and calling the heroes over, Immortal, who he contacted last, was in a battle against a freaking biplane. With what I assume was complete ease, Bro threw his ass into space, ending the plane's life. Not gonna lie, out of probably everything like death-wise in the series, spacification is always a pretty particularly messed up way to go. Obviously, the heroes don't have a clue about this though, and after seeing Immortal arrive at the Utah base, they jump to the conclusion that he had called them there. Before they could think though, a random assailant smashes Aquarius and Red Rush's face together, decapitates Green Ghost, snaps War Woman's neck, disembowels Martian Man and impales Darkwing. Immortal looks around at the carnage and notices the person who did it. He tells them that he never truly liked him before he is too decapitated. Turns out that this was Nolan, who had purposefully called all of the Guardians to get them in one place and kill them. Obviously, the animation added a few things in here and there, but for now I'm just going to stick to all of the deaths that happen inside of the comic itself. The anime itself is pretty damn nutty with its own death toll. It immediately ends up dwarfing the comics in like the second episode, I think. By the way, apologies if I miss any massive deaths that correlate with the Invincible universe as well. I've just gone through the main comic, finding as many as possible there, from which I don't think I've missed any at all. But there are so many other series that work in with the Invincible universe that you should read, when specific things happen, that I haven't gone and read, so none of those deaths are included. Now, moving into what was the Perfect Strangers arc, we have a good number of random and unnamed people that get completely fodderized. The man to do the fodderizing was of course our dad. Good old Nolan's first victim here, or like 12th at this point in the series, was the giant squid monster, who he killed by simply flying into the damn thing. Right after this, he then for a second time kills Immortal, who obviously gets resurrected at a later date. In the 11th issue, Nolan then delves into the history of the Viltrumite Empire and the things they've done to achieve their overwhelming dominance in the universe. While doing this, we bear witness to a bunch of deaths throughout a variety of different places. From what I could see, there were two unnamed Viltrumites who were killed by their own kind, one having his head removed from his body and the other having it bashed in. On another planet, 3 random aliens are seen impaled through their backs by large poles. Paws, obviously. During his own fight audition, Nolan is then shown decapitating a robot with a single punch. Later on, he's then also shown crushing the neck of an alien with his left hand, and finally, he murks 5 Unopins with some explosives. So that there brings us to a total of 34 deaths already throughout the comic. During issue 12 and the Mark vs Nolan or Invincible vs Omni-Man battle, however you want to name it, Nolan drives his son at a ferocious speed into the side of a train, killing 11 civilians on board. To be honest, I always thought that more random civilians died throughout the battle in the comic, but to see that it was only 11 was kind of super surprising. Finally, after 45 odd deaths in the story, we have a short break for 3 or so volumes, as I couldn't for the life of me even find a single decapitation. Once I did though, it wasn't even that hectic, as it was just a mention of how Claire Bono's dad had died of unspecified causes. Issue 16, however, came back with an absolute bloodbath, as we found ourselves in another dimension. Angstrom, having been out doing some kind of scouting and whatnot, returned to his base. Sadly for his ass, he was followed. Bursting in through the ceiling, alternate Omni-Man with his bare hands dome slaps Immortal, killing him for, a good old 3rd time here. At the same time then, alternate Invincible cuts alternate Rudy in half, rips dude's head from his body before crushing it between his palms. The amount of universe and alternate people swapping that goes on throughout these deaths here is utterly insane, so just get ready for the amount of alternate Marks that end up dying, or alternate freaking Omni-Mans, robots, and other guys from the Guardians that end up dying throughout different dimensions is absolutely insane. After Angstrom, who was actually at this base, escaped, we found ourselves back in the midst of a battle in New York, where probably, from what I could see, 3 or so aliens were killed by random people. This here actually marks the point where we've reached 51 confirmed deaths in the story. However, the number that we're about to add to this completely dwarfs anything so far in the comic. It's truly insane, and it's only mentioned in passing. It's not like we even see this go down. Pretty much, during the Facts of Life arc, or issue 20, 3,257,109,836 random human men from an alternate timeline universe all succumb to an unknown virus. Just mentioning something like that as well leaves me with so many unanswered questions that I need to know. Surely it's something I could possibly even read about in another Invincible comic or another comic in the Image series. Either way, again in the same volume, a singular reaniman chose to visit the Shadow Realm himself. Dumbass literally tried to jump up and attack Mark, failed, then fell to his death, which, I gotta salute, man had one goal in mind and tried to achieve it, but just failed drastically. Anyway, now our total is obviously 3,257,109,888 people in total. Back to a little bit of normality though, a few randoms get what's coming to them. Nightboy, a man of familiar stature, cracked under the immense pressure of his crime-ridden city. In a rage, he lost control and killed 2 unarmed men and 1 woman. Next up, Ellen, who is actually one of my favourite characters from throughout the series. Bro's just always the chillest, gets a beating done to him that he won't forget for millennia. During a battle against the Viltrumite Lucin, Ellen has his face smashed, body impaled, arm completely torn from it, and intestines removed, leaving him obviously dead. Luckily, he's far too much of a main character to stay dead for too long, and is eventually resurrected by Thaddeus. In issue 24 of the series, Mark goes up against 6 alternate versions of the Mauler twins in a very heated battle. They literally all burn to death in an explosion accidentally caused by Mark. During the secret origin of Duplicate, where we learn all about Kate's ancestry, Vung Cha goes literal ham and kills 7 people before finally dying of old age at a later date. Another man to also die of old age was the Thraxan Emperor on the planet that Nolan had decided to live on after fleeing from Earth in Viltrum. After the Viltrums then showed up on the same planet, all hell broke loose. Firstly, they smashed a bridge, causing around 28 to 30 unnamed Thraxans to fall to their deaths. Then, in the next issue, they destroyed an entire city, probably killing thousands, but I could only find a recorded thing stating 784 Thraxans who lived there died. We never see the attack itself, but the aftermath is shown. In the next issue, the Maulers are back, the big ass bozos that love a bit of infighting, to the point that literally one of them poisoned King Mauler, subsequently ending his life. Later on then, in the same issue, Omni-Man goes NATO on a random Viltrumite, crushes his throat along with caving in his head with a headbutt. with over 3,257,110,719 deaths in the series so far, and with us not even being a quarter of the way through the series, we now move into the next story arc, commonly known as Three's Company. It's only a short arc, but during it, 9 more people fall victim to the one true god, death. And there is only one thing we say to the god of death.
Where's my sister?
The first of issue 33's Merkins was a sentient dino who was being munched down on by 3 other sentient dinos. Typical birds eating birds. 3 more randos were then subsequently killed when they were turned into zombies, and another 4 died of completely unknown causes. The only name of real merit who came to see his own demise here was Angstrom Levy, who after getting into it with Mark, had his skull crushed after being repeatedly punched. However, as we all came to know, bro was fixed up by his engineers in another dimension, and I kinda question even if he died to start with, but you know, I'll add it in here. He would have died if he didn't have engineers and stuff. Bro's head was literally a pancake. From here, the story moved into the My Favorite Martian section of the story, obviously featuring more of the goat Ellen the alien. Not that we see him here though, because man is obviously an alien of high morals and would totally never kill anyone. Before we think more on Ellen's beautiful stature though, over on Earth, Mark, in an attempt to save his boy, Will, broke into D.A. Sinclair's reaniman experimentation lab and took 3 of his creatures down. In the next issue of the story, Supreme Lizard, a high-ranking member of the Lizard League, an unstoppable force of nature, was shot through the forehead by the King Lizard, who took back lead of the Lizard League. After the goated Lizard League King got his throne back, issue 39 featured a total of 6 deaths. Firstly, 4 unnamed Martians were killed when their brains were taken over by sequids. Then Iguana, which by the way is like the coolest lizard. Iguanas are just way too cool. I literally want one as a pet, but they're far too expensive. But either way, she used her claws to impale a man through the back, then slice up another guard's face, subsequently adding them both to the enormous kill total. Issue 40 is built different and goes back to a bit more of what we really came here for, actual character deaths, not just random humans and whatnot. Firstly, after bursting onto a ship in space with the crew, Bulletproof spots a singular sequid and crushes it, subsequently alerting the entire swarm of sequids. Elsewhere in Wyoming, of all places, Case and her crew enacted an assault on the enemy base. Almost immediately after getting into battle though, Komodo Dragon starts going on a rampage and obliterates seemingly all of Duplicate's clones. Like, he claims that he got them all, however, we know for a fact that not all of them died and one survives as she's seen again at a later date. I'll just total it at around 25 dead clones for now. Probably makes sense that it's about that much. Not overly stoked with seeing his girl pretty much die 30 odd times in front of him, Rex loses it and blows up Salamander and Iguana with explosions. Sadly, it wasn't enough to bring down Komodo, who managed to eat Shrinking Ray alive at the same time. Rex, having witnessed too much for his brain to comprehend, charges a BB to take Komodo down with the last of his strength. Komodo, unfazed by it, catches Rex's arm and bites it off. However, the dumbass did not realise that bro's attack was still charged, and in turn it eventually exploded, causing the head of Komodo to also erupt, killing him. Rex though wasn't exactly out of danger, as though while reflecting on all of the things that have happened recently, King Lizard snuck up on his ass from behind and shot him in the dome. Since he's too vital to the overall story though, as you'll come to see, and because his body wasn't destroyed in a mass explosion, he ends up getting revived. A few chapters after Rex gets murked, we find ourselves with the Viltrumite Anissa, who impales a random alien monster through the head. 2 chapters later, and during Invincible's little battle against Paul Char with Rex, the guys take out a fair few number of clones. Invincible then flies into a few more, killing them, while Rex takes out the others in an explosion. Next up, we have a bunch of insect and worm-like creatures that are killed by a varying number of the Earthen heroes. In issue 50 of the series, Mark decides to confront Cecil for his continued use of the reaniman. The battle was short, but in total, 10 reaniman were killed, 9 of them by Invincible, with the other sole one having its head exploded by Rex. During issue 51 of the series, Cecil, in his own feature arc about his origin, shoots 2 members of the Order of the Flying Fist through the chest. Then later on, an unknown creature is beaten to death by Omni-Man. In the 52nd issue of the series, we go back over to the Mauler twins, who finally end up meeting death themselves. Don't know what it is with these absolute meatheads, but god, they remind me of meth heads in Rage when they fight. The first twin gets absolutely eviscerated here when Oliver goes flying into him at a high speed, while the second gets an absolute beating, having his brain, eyeball, and just dome in general carved outwards from taking a direct punch from Oliver. A few chapters later, Invincible ends up in a battle against a future version of Immortal. And if you didn't guess it, yes, Immortal once again died for like the 5th time now I think, and like father like son, Invincible rips the dude's head from his body. Next up on the seemingly freaking infinite list of deaths, we have some more pathetic ass Viltrumites who couldn't even hold their breath in space for a prolonged period of time. The airlock explosion was caused by the Goat Alan and our father Nolan, which in total killed 20 men. In the same issue, Alan finally gets his revenge on Lucen, the guy who previously killed him. In combination with Nolan, they crush his skull with a volley of punches. Being one of the main Viltrumites though, he was later found by other Viltrumites and revived for the upcoming battles. Back on Earth now, we find Mark in his bout against the reaniman. Here, he manages to take down another 3, smashing the head of 2 in and the neck area of another. I can't lie to you guys, accidental or like Final Destination type deaths in any series are always my favourite. Things just happen that you seemingly have no control over. Here in issue 59, it sadly happens to an entire family. 2 of the Duvalls, Jessica who was the mother and Jack who was the son, were accidentally electrocuted to death by Scott Duvall, also known as the hero Powerplex, who was sadly Jack's father and Jessica's wife. Moving into the Invincible War now, the world itself is thrown into complete disarray when around 20 alternate Invincibles invade the main timeline under the order of Angstrom Levy. In another dimension before we made it back to the main timeline though, Albert Simmons was killed by his universe's Invincible. We don't ever see it happen, as it's only mentioned in passing conversation. The same also happens to Eve, Nolan, and Debbie from differing timelines. Sadly, they were also all killed by their Invincible. When it came to the ones that we were actually privy to, the first was when an alternate Mark was beaten to death by Britt and Donald. Pitt then does his thing and rips another alternate Mark's eyes out before dismantling his freaking jaw. If you didn't see this one coming, Immortal was also killed again when, yes, he had his head freaking ripped off by an alternate version of Invincible. Love that guy. Next up to get freaking murked was Kate, or more specifically, only 6 of her clones, which were killed off by alternate versions of Invincible. The third man to actually take down one of the alternate Marks was Nightboy when he pulled one of the Marks into the Shadowverse. Rex then, in a move that, like, let's be fully honest, bro probably didn't need to do, turned his spine specifically into a bomb and exploded. This obviously resulted in both the death of Rex and the alternate Invincible that was fighting him. To be honest as well, like, I'm pretty sure if bro just died here, took the loss, got impaled or something, Cecil could have found his ass and brought him back. But obviously maybe he has other intentions in mind. Funnily enough, after Madman then takes out another version of Invincible in his own fights, it's shown that 3 more Invincibles were also killed off in other battles. However, we don't know exactly who took them down or when they were killed. But our total now stands at 3,257,110,846 deaths in total. Of course, I can't forget to mention that in a passing conversation afterwards about just the pure damage done to Earth, it was said that at minimum 3 million men, women and children had died due to the fighting. There is also just a random guy that Mark finds buried in rubble right before he's told by freaking Conquest that he's a pathetic little worm.
Stand ready for my arrival, worm.
Honestly, that's probably one of the coolest lines in the comics so far that's been animated, and I can't wait to see the stuff that ends up happening with Thragg in the later seasons. It's going to be, like, actually great. But obviously, adding 3 million to our total that we just had, we now have 3,260,110,847 deaths in the series. During the battle against Conquest, I'm pretty sure other civilians would have died, like those poor construction workers that were fixing the city back up. Rest in peace the bros, any construction workers watching this by the way. Ayo, I used to lay concrete and pipe for real. But more importantly, in the grand scheme of the story here, Eve, as we all saw, was impaled through the chest by Conquest. She does die from this, however, due to just straight up having the best RNG roll of a power you could possibly get, she is revived immediately. Like, it literally happens every single time she dies in the series. Just to spoil you now, every time Eve dies, instant revive. That's pretty much how it works. Someone else to get the insta-revive, and mad spoilers for the episode that just dropped, I guess, probably a week late. This video took way longer to do than I thought it was going to do. But Conquest, after having his head headbutted 19 times by Mark, completely crushing his face in a similar way to, you know, what Mark did to Angstrom Levy, you know, leaving him like a pancake on the floor, was taken off and revived by someone random on Earth. I wonder, you know, who it could possibly be. I won't spoil it just in case, but yeah. In preparation for the Viltrumite War, we delve a lot more into the species as a whole through a conversation from Nolan. During the flashback, we see a few Viltrumites killing other Viltrumites, showing just how volatile their society was. Another random, and possibly even Patient Zero, was then infected and dies from the Scourge virus. From the sky, it then quickly infected most of the population, killing 99.9% of all Viltrumite life on Viltrum. There is no exact number given to us, nor could I find a confirmed one, but we can take a little guess here. The entire race itself was a pretty wild one, so even though they'd spread out across multiple planets, I don't expect that they'd have more than 8 billion people in total like we do here on Earth. 50 is only 0.1% of 50,000, so if we take what Nolan said literally, then there was only 50,000 Viltrumites. But I doubt this is entirely true, and it wasn't the full percentage that was given to us. It was probably shortened for levity, since the comics are told in little like speech bubbles and whatnot. In reality, it's probably like 99.999535231% of the entire population that was killed off, leaving even less than an entire percent left over. And if we chuck that in the calculator, because, you know, I cannot math the absolute shit, we get just over 1,095,345,727 Viltrumite souls. I know it's never going to be exact, but I feel like this is more realistic. No way 100 million people creates a ring around an entire planet, as we could see. Like, that ring is extremely dense and thick with people. The number is probably even higher than what I have here, but, you know, I'll never be able to get that exact number, so if anyone has, you know, a good guess, leave them down below. Love crossing that 4.3 billion life loss threshold just to go back to these singular deaths now. During the absolutely goated issue 69, a random dude is then beaten up and bashed by Universal with her staff, or should I say beaten off. Russ Livingston, a man who never really lived up to his name, was killed by a singular punch from Invincible. In the same chapter, Rudy gets into it with a sequid brain thingy and stomps its ass, killing it. I had a little bit of debate over whether or not I should include pathetic things like sequids in the deaths, but why not? I'm just literally including as much as I can at this point. Now, moving into the legendary Viltrumite War, which, by the way, if you are interested, I've just covered the full arc, so be sure to check that out after this video if you want to know what happens in the kind of like next season. It'll only be the stuff that happens towards the end of the next season, but yeah, you get me. In the early stages of the war, like just after Mark and Nolan were picked up by the coalition of planets, their spaceship was hit, causing a number of unknown deaths. Turns out that the man to launch a sneak attack on the ship was no one other than Conquest. After an intense battle with him, where, like previously, Mark is beaten to a pulp, he somehow manages to suffocate Conquest and win. This though is at a great cost, as he pretty much dies himself and has to heal up over a few months. With Mark, Nolan and Oliver then taking a few months off to train and heal up, the Coalition's efforts in the war took a turn for the worse, causing even more untold amounts of destruction. Sadly though, we have no idea how many people live on Telescria or the other planets that were in war, or who even dies in those battles to start with. Along with that, the army that came with the Viltrumites to attack the Coalition homeworld of Telescria surrendered after Mark and the crew made their return. Throughout the next heated battle, it's mentioned that according to Thragg, Thetis was the one who actually killed the previous Viltrumite Emperor, Agril. It's suspected that he shanked Agril's dome by just looking at, you know, what damage is done to the skull there. The next issue features some of the most intense fighting from throughout the series so far. So as the crew rolled up to Viltrum, instead of a sneak attack by Mark and them, Thula alerted the 50 or so Viltrumites to their presence. As things broke out, Space Racer pulled up and unloaded his legendary weapon into the shoulder of an unnamed Viltrumite, killing him. Space Racer is honestly a pretty cool guy. Like, I'd love to do a solo video on him one day. His gun and how it works especially is interesting to me. The Ragnar that good old Space Racer had brought to the battle with him were then let loose and immediately targeted the Viltrumite due to the mind control gear that was equipped on them. This resulted in 2 more unnamed deaths. One random was impaled, while the other had his head literally bitten off. Alan, over with his boy Zack and their own kind of scuffle, ends up taking down 2 more randoms. I shouldn't just say he took them down, bro completely and utterly violated these 2 Viltrumites. Firstly, he punches one man's head clean off his shoulders before swinging around and driving his fist up through the stomach of another and out his freaking mouth. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows though. Oliver, in what I can say is one of the dumbest decisions in the galaxy, decides to target the Grand Regent, Thragg. Catching his pathetic punch in front of him, Thragg jokes with the kid for a moment, before tearing his arm off and smashing his mouth inwards with a punch. Obviously, this damage here left Oliver on the verge of death. If it wasn't for his specific genetic makeup, then he would have fully died, but since his ass is too much of a main cast member, he was revived. Finally, Thragg then turns his attention to the great betrayer, Thedas. Done with watching his race slowly whittle away, Thragg rages out, dashes forward, and tears the old man's head from his body. Turning to the others, he lifts up their head and crushes it, fulfilling the revenge that he's long sought after. Battle Beast immediately tried to take Thragg down, however he too was quickly restrained before having his neck broken. Luckily, Toot is fixed back up and brought back to continue fighting later on. Still alive himself, Space Racer goes to flee and sees a man in his way. With eerie precision, he sends his ass to the Shadow Realm with a headshot. Back with Thragg, and again with father like son, but this time in a little bit of a role reversal with son first, Thragg, with a speed that isn't even comparable to anything Mark had seen, quickly impales Nolan through the stomach with his hand. Mark is then also beaten to a point near death, but it's not something I'd even consider as a death itself, unless, he wasn't picked up for a few months by the Coalition, then I'd consider it a death since bro would have run out of air and suffocated. But as Nolan says in the very next chapter, that's one of the main reasons they survived their blacked out time and space. Throughout this section of fighting, we only saw around 10 or 11 deaths in total, including the non-Viltrumites. According to Nolan, like a few chapters ago, there was at least 50 Viltrumites, and it's mentioned at the end of this fight that there are only 37 left. So somewhere we lost at least another 7 Viltrumites off screen, probably during this fight against people like Nolan, Alan and Battle Beast who could just easily one-hit them. I'll just say we lost another 13 plus the 3 Coalition fighters, another 16 in total to add to their 3.55 billion deaths so far. Following the Viltrumite war, and once Mark gets reacquainted with everyone back on Earth, he heads over to Las Vegas to stop this jacked up red dino who's hell-bent on destroying the city. I can't lie, it's a kind of funny fight where this dino wants to destroy Las Vegas for the good of the Earth. He even tries evacuating the civilians beforehand, thinking their deaths unnecessary. However, after Mark forces him into enacting his plan, Dinosaurus completely and utterly levels the entire city in a devastating blast. Coming to after, a naked Mark looks around to see nothing but a sheet of glass where the bombs once went off. I love the idea that bombing sand turns it into glass afterwards. No idea if that's true in any way. By the way, Las Vegas has around 650,000 residents in our own world, and we can assume, say, to 50 to 100,000 of those people escaped the city before the explosion. So including Dinosaurus, I calculated this at around 590,000 people dying. That being said, I also didn't see any sign of a wider metropolitan area surviving. I'd assume that it was also destroyed completely by this explosion, and that tally would bring it up even more, to around 2.5 million as just a rough guesstimate. If anyone disagrees with that, then let me know down below, but our new total is now 4,357,956,600 in total. Enough with overanalyzing the doom of Vegas. Next up, and in a conversation between Mark and the captured Universa, it's mentioned that she ended up killing 3 guards. Elsewhere on the globe, and at a later date now, Magma Maniac and his boy follow their boss's orders and attack a few of the Guardians. After melting 2 random civilians upon entering the room, Volt is ordered to kill Magma Maniac. Within a few moments, he easily gets his hands around Magma's head and crushes it, killing him. Going back to Dinosaurus, who, I guess, didn't die, and after a crazy ass decision to let him loose from the secure containment facility, the dino goes absolutely NATO and omnipotent and crushes his dome before tearing it off, leaving his body to explode afterwards. Elsewhere in the universe, and in a similar manner to Dinosaurus, Thragg killed a random doctor by also crushing his dome with his bare hands. Throughout issue 92 and 93 of the story, we have 3 more deaths to add to the list. It's nothing of too much note, but in one battle, Octobos has their face smashed in by Monster Girl, subsequently killing them. In another conversation, it's then mentioned that Squin was killed by the Thraxans. However, we never actually see what happens in the main story there. A death we do see though is that of the cult of the Sky God's leader. In a scuffle there, half of his body is hit by a blast fired by Monax, causing him to burn up and die. When it comes to the Randolph family, we learn through a flashback that during an experiment to give his brothers powers, Tyrone accidentally killed himself in an explosion. This sad situation really doesn't get any better. Turns out he was explaining this to his parents, who believed Tyrone, their favourite child, had been alive the entire time. Both of the parents broke down in a rage, and to calm the situation, Bulletproof's girlfriend, for some random ass reason, smashes Harriet in the head with a frying pan, caving her skull in and killing her. I don't get this girl, man. Instantly grabbing this heathen of a woman, Randolph Sr. goes to strangle the life out of her. Not wanting his dad to hurt the love of his life, Bulletproof, in a moment of self-defense, grabs his father's neck. However, the moment he does, it accidentally breaks his neck and kills him. All bro wanted to do was tell the truth about how he'd been living as his brother his entire life, and it's resulted in him now being the one remaining family member. No thanks to obviously his missus as well, who needs to learn to chill the hell out. Like, what was she even thinking? Towards the deaths of everyone arc, things got absolutely insane. Firstly, Dinosaurus, the #1 man in the entire series when it comes to sending out Shadow Realm invites, stuns everyone to silence. In a move no one expected, on live television, he monstrously smashes Mark's Doman before ripping his body apart. Turns out though, that luckily this was only a clone and the real Invincible was being held captive by Dinosaurus. Not done with just killing off clone Mark to fool the masses, Dinosaurus sets off an extremely large set of explosions here placed all over what I assume to be Greenland. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's Greenland. Obviously, the ice sheets that broke off caused mass flooding on almost every coast of the entire planet. Cecil mentions to Mark after that the death toll is at 800,000 and counting, so we probably should take that literally and start adding on numbers, because no way would the entire coastline of the globe only add up to 1 million or 800,000. That's just pathetically, that does not make sense. He's undercutting it by far. If every human on every coast on the planet was taken simultaneously by surprise, then 1 billion people would die within a few kilometers of the coast. I think it's like within 10 kilometers of the coast it's 1 billion people, and then within 50 it's 2.5 billion. We know that Greenland's situated in between Canada and kind of like Europe and whatnot, so most of the fallout is going to be contained within those coasts and the Atlantic Ocean area. The total coastal population of the Atlantic Ocean, Gulf of America, Caribbean Sea, the North Sea, Greenland, Norwegian Sea and Celtic Seas is somewhere around 250 million people, possibly even higher if you take into account there's probably more people on the coasts in like Europe and whatnot. We can assume some people definitely got away from this or to higher ground in time, so as a rough guesstimate I'll include another 200 million people to our already enormous death tally. So now we are sitting at a calming 4,557,956,613 deaths in the story in total. Due to obviously causing an untold amount of destruction to the citizens of Earth, Mark finally comes to his senses and kills Dinosaurus on his request. In issue 103, good old Mark goes up against an old foe in Angstrom Levy. After seeing Eve in a tight spot, he goes to save her, only to be sent into another dimension. Obviously, Levy sent him to the same dimension he sent other multiple Invincibles to. After then running around the desert-like environment for a moment, Mark turns to find one of his alternate twins devouring the arm of another alternate Invincible. From what I can see, there are at least 4 skeletons around him, so that's what I'll add to the list. The dude initially offers Mark a seat, but after he gets all cracked out and invades his personal space, Mark spazzes out, punching him off him. Bro then tries to leave the area, only for Mohawk Mark to show up and start to help him fight off the other Invincible, who wouldn't let him escape. With the other 2 Marks then teamed up, the battle really isn't that fair, and Mohawk Mark easily manages to tackle him down before repeatedly pummeling his head into the ground while screaming that he made him eat all of the other Marks. Elsewhere on a random world now, Battle Beast interrupts an alien king's conversation with his masses by hooking him in the face with his mace-type weapon. Having just witnessed their leader die, 2 guards attempt to take down Battle Beast, however he easily overpowers and smashes them with his mace. At the same time, in an unknown location, Doc Seismic stands tall and screams out to his Magmamite that he, their ruler, has returned. In a flash, dude is hit by a beam of lava though, before the Magma King grabs his ass and buries him alive in magma. Dr. Seismic doesn't actually technically die here, but instead eventually becomes a part of the Magma Beast itself. In the very next issue, Volcanica and the Magma Beasts, including Dr. Seismic, enact their attack on Earth, quickly ending up in a battle against the Guardians. Sadly for us, there is no hectic magma type deaths with people being burnt to bits. Instead, Anissa pulls up on the block and boosts at sonic speed through a magma creature that was helping the squad fight. Later that same night, Mark ends up receiving a call from Rex, letting him know that they've located Angstrom's position. Once inside the alternate dimension, they find that Angstrom isn't exactly the person in charge. Instead, it's Mohawk Mark. Seeing the other Mark as a ruler of an entire dimension, Robot decides to betray his mate and releases a low sonic pulse that completely cripples all Viltrumites in the room. He then kills a scientist with his laser and shoots a small explosive into the mouth of Mohawk Mark. A fraction of a second later, it exploded and sent his ass to the Shadow Realm. Then, with no hesitation, he kills the already extremely damaged Angstrom, leaving our Mark with no way of then escaping back to the main image dimension. In that same dimension, it was mentioned through a conversation that our favourite alternate Mark killed off one of that universe's Mauler twins. Another alternate person to pass on technically wasn't a person, but the bot himself, Rudy, who was crushed by a large falling piece of rubble. Once Mark finally does make it back to Earth, he manages to get to Cecil first and explain what happened between him and Rudy. Cecil says that Mark's accusations are believable, since Rudy has been asking for Global Defense Agency emergency protocols recently. Seeing no other choice and having got back in, Rex's drone emits a sonic pulse, taking advantage of Mark's inner ear weakness. He draws a blade hidden in his drone hand and slits Cecil's throat, stating that Cecil's death was on Mark. Mark then watches helplessly as the drone stomps on Cecil's head until its blood spews all over the area. Slowly getting back to his feet under the immense pain of his eardrums being wrung, Mark somehow manages to throw a punch that shatters the drone to bits. Armoring up though and sending off a number of drones towards Earth, Robot starts enacting his plan and killing any hero who might oppose his authority. To start with, he finds Black Samson cutting some old bloke's hair. He happily greets him, saying it's about time he showed up for a damn low taper fade. Infuriated with the idea, Robot immediately cuts him in half with a laser blast to his gut. Elephant is sadly also targeted and quickly decapitated after leaving his hero form. Can't lie, I'm feeling a little bit of racial bias for Robot this chapter. Third up to meet Yama Yugi in the Shadow Realm is Sarah, who was cut down by a laser beam to the face. Kid Thor, who was right next to her when it happened, tried to strike one of the clones, but was easily overpowered, having his hammer destroyed. This in turn created a massive explosion that disintegrated him, pretty much confirming his death in all but name. The fifth victim of Robot's rampage was Shapeshift, who we found cut in half, pleading for his life. Not accepting this man's friendship, Robot picks up his organ sac and crushes it in his palm. Over with another souped up version of Robot wreaking havoc in the Pentagon, Dude manages to take down a few reaniman by beating them off, before committing to a kermicidal attack and blowing himself up in a blaze of glory. Probably pretty obvious as well here, but this managed to take out the 4 remaining reaniman there. Over on another part of the globe, Robot tried to take down Brit and his kid, only to be cut in half by young Brit who was throwing at him in a super shoe. Issue 115, a fan favourite of the series just due to how it starts, is without me really even needing to say, one of the greatest battles in the entire story. The two monoliths of strength end up finding each other and are about to start fighting when all of a sudden Ragnar are released onto the planet. Not wanting to be held back from achieving glory in his battle, Battle Beast quickly decapitates one of the creatures with his sword. Moving towards the other, he, with a rage-filled demeanour, cuts them down with ease. Quickly boosting it onto the battlefield as well, alien soldiers equipped with high-power laser guns manage to take down the few remaining Ragnar. Now alone with Thragg, Battle Beast notices his opponent's injured abdomen and lack of weapons. Not wanting an advantage in this fight, he slices his own stomach open and tosses away his buster blade. What follows is utter destruction, a fight to be remembered and awed over for ages to come. I'd go into it more here, but for time's sake and the fact that I want to cover this in a solo video as well, probably next season, I'll skip to the moment of Battle Beast's demise. Laying on the ground, beaten from head to toe, Battle Beast thanks Thragg for giving him a worthy battle. Thragg then crushes his heart, successfully killing the mighty warrior and giving him the glory he longed for. Moments later, Thragg also succumbs to his injuries, however, the Thraxan population managed to quickly take him off to be healed. Later in the same issue, on a random alien planet, Mark helps an alien child get what they believe to be her pet back. The girl then straight up eats the poor thing, much to Eve and Mark's shock. Over on Earth, some of the heroes were still not content with the current situation and had kept fighting Rex's clones. Obviously, I hadn't gone into it here because this is just in like all deaths video, but Rex managed to pretty much take over the Pentagon and Earth itself using his clones. Kate, in a hope that she could save her children, sacrificed at minimum 6 of her clones in an attempt to escape. Kate does end up escaping. Sadly for her though, Immortal was captured and taken to a secure holding facility where all of the other heroes who rebelled were being held. Turns out this was actually all a part of his plan. Inside him was a bomb that once far enough into the facility, exploded, helping free all of the trapped heroes. Immortal somehow didn't actually die here though. The last few deaths of this volume were 2 reaniman who helped in holding off a large amount of Rex's robots. During issue 122, or is that baby going to be in mortal danger every issue? Maybe, shut up. We see that the baby was in mortal danger as following the request of Alan, Mark went to the so-called Greenlands like he suggested. Once there, both Mark and Eve were attacked by these aliens called Thraxans, killing 2 in the process before fleeing. Once with Oliver, Mark and him then journeyed together around the planets. Randomly, they noticed an illegal Canslock farm and decided to investigate. They land on the ground and, seeing them, the Telescreen aliens release a Rhinax to fight the heroes. We never even see them take down the Rhinax, which, by the way, was rumoured to be the last of its entire species. It's just mentioned that they both won when the blokes arrived back in the Telescreen capital city. A few issues later, Representative Elia from the Coalition of Planets enacts a mutiny and tries to take over control of the Order. During combat against a few of Elia's guards, Alan smashes 2 random guys' faces together, subsequently killing them. Immediately after, he then jumps onto and gets a hold of Elia. Not willing to be taken prisoner herself, she activates a bomb she'd placed nearby, in turn blowing herself up and heavily injuring Alan. I'd imagine the rest of the aliens in the room also died, but it's kinda hard to get an exact gauge on how many were there, so I'll just tally it at 8. In the main image timeline, we see that Omni-Man has one of Levy's doctors in his grasp. Under the order of Rex in one of his robot suits, he demands his death. Moments later, Omni-Man follows through with these orders and crushes his throat. Elsewhere in the universe, and at this point in the series, Thragg had managed to repopulate with other races and had built back a good number of Viltrumite children soldiers. One of these older and stronger ones, Onan, gets in a fight with a few pathetic aliens. With absolute ease, he rips 2 in half and impales the other with shards of what look like glass to me. During issue 130, another alien invasion is enacted on Earth by an unknown alien race. In passing conversation, it is revealed that due to Rex's thorough protection of the entire globe, only 1,513 people died worldwide, a feat that many thought to be impossible. Over with Thragg and his empire of Viltrumite children, we see him beating the shit out of a Sol Ragnar in some sort of training exercise. We can also see at least 1 more dead behind him, confirming that bro's taken down at least 2 in this exercise with his students. Poor old Eddie, rest in peace bud. Terra's teacher and a robot that has been very dear to the Grayson family was crushed to death by Onan when the Viltrumite children made their entrance on, obviously the planet that Mark and his family were hiding on. Well, if it's not obvious as well, because of the attack that was just initiated on Mark, the probably most ruthless deaths of the series start from this point onwards. Thragg, who got a hold of Terra, was saved when Oliver tackled him off her and screamed that she rushed to go find her father. Sadly, it took literally seconds for Thragg to overpower Oliver and punch him through his stomach, ending his life. After this, and while learning from Thragg that it was actually his brother, the just deceased Oliver, who betrayed him, revealing his location, Mark crushed Onan's throat, decapitating him in the process. Raging out herself over just seeing her kid brother killed, Ursula dove in and kicked Eve in the back, breaking her spine. Stuck on the ground, unable to move anymore, Eve can only watch as Ursula hammers down on her, breaking her jaw and leaving her there to bleed out. Simultaneously to this, Thragg gets his hands on Mark and, in one pure display of how strong he truly is, tears him vertically in half. Damn, obviously one of, if not the nastiest death in the entire series. Not that y'all can see it entirely, because if I showed it without blur, instant demonetization, but it makes sense because, Invincible does not hold back on the brutality at all. Moments later, Thragg then leaves, hoping the 3 bleed out slowly. However, the same power that activated in the Conquest fight also activates here for Eve. From this, she's able to somehow repair the bodies of her and Mark fully. Sadly, Oliver wasn't able to be brought back, confirming his actual death. There is no reviving for Oliver from this point out. Now, we move into the final 10 issues of the series. This set of chapters is called The End of All Things, so you just know what's about to go down is truly insane. It really is the end of everything we once knew. Straight off the bat, in issue 135, Ursula and another of her brothers tear through 3 random aliens on their path back to meet with Grand Regent Thragg. On another planet, Mark, along with his father and a few other people, manage to bring the Viltrumite war to a close. During the final few moments of combat, Thresher, using her blade-like claws, easily takes down 2 unnamed aliens. Same thing in the past as well. I'm not sure how many people died in the war exactly that was going on here, so I'll only add what I know for certain, which is like the 5 deaths we saw. Elsewhere on Battle Beast's planet, a few of the King's men question his decision to side with Thragg, as he only seeks to enslave them. Turning to his ambassador, Rock asks him if he's lost his mind. Without hesitation, one of the King's guards then skewer the ambassador from behind, killing him. In issue 136 of the series, Mark, Alan, Nolan, Eve, Space Racer, and the other Viltrumites on their side started an attack on Thragg's new homeworld. Not realizing just how many children Thragg had managed to have while on this planet, the group is stunned to see hundreds of fighting age Viltrumites flying towards them. Like, Thragg literally went Genghis Khan levels of insane on this planet. Without stopping and in a kermicidal rage, around 20 Viltrumites disintegrate themselves to bits by flying into Mark. It's crazy to see just like how much stronger Mark has managed to become over the course of this, video. Also, at the same time, being hit by a bunch of Thragg's children, Nolan bursts through them to help Eve in her battle. However, as soon as he manages to get her out of harm's way, another massive wave of Viltrumites starts to rush into him like a never-ending tidal wave. I have no idea how many died between Mark and Nolan there, so I'm just going to tally it up at around 50 kermicidal Viltrumites. Seeing Eve continue to struggle in the fight herself, Mark starts freaking out and boosts in her direction, cutting down 4 more of Thragg's fighters in the process. Over in their own fight, Ellen and Space Racer manage to take down around 6 Viltrumites by either shooting or physically tearing them in half. Before fleeing back to the ship, Nolan, who's easily broken free from the previous attack, takes out another 4 soldiers by punching their heads off. From here, we move to the battle in front of the sun. Seeing the old Viltrumite forces with Craig at its head heading for them, Thragg whips forward the Ragnar that he had under his control. In a matter of moments, the creatures, under the expert use of Thragg's ropes, manage to take down 3 of the attacking Viltrumites by biting their heads off. I should also mention that during this fight here, a huge mass of weaker Viltrumite children are killed off. We have no idea what the number is, so I'm just going to calculate it as a few hundred, probably around 300 to 400. I imagine most of the older Viltrumite forces, when in combat with the younger ones as well, will pretty much have little to no problem fighting them off, so it's just a complete and utter bloodbath on Thragg's side here. This section of the story also features some of the most awaited fights of the entire series. The first of those was Nolan, or Omni-Man, versus the Grand Regent Thragg. After a very tough fought fight, Thragg slowly manages to get the upper hand against his fellow pureblood. The 2 monoliths of strength throw their domes together, and in the moments that follows, Thragg, at a speed that most cannot comprehend, manages to pierce his hand through Nolan's chest. Realizing though that Nolan can somehow comprehend that speed, and he moved at the last minute to protect his heart, Thragg throws his arm sideways, in turn ripping apart Omni-Man's chest. Having just witnessed his father die, Mark grabs a kid's arm and rips it off before elbowing him in the face. Pushing forwards, all of the fighters grabbing him explode outwards, giving Mark time to rush in Thragg's direction. While Mark and Thragg then start their bout, we can see Alan and another Viltrumite kill off 2 more hybrid Viltrumites. Seeing Eve also get attacked by a Ragnar while trying to bring Nolan back to life, Anissa rushes over and manages to push the creature back, which is actually insane because if you didn't know, well, Anissa, she kinda did the dirty to Mark and I'm gonna have to beep that out, but you guys get me, she did the dirty to him. Sadly though, while her back is turned, the Ragnar lashes out and cuts her open from the chest to head. Eve attempts to save her as well, and Anissa even apologizes for raping Mark in the past. Back in the main bout though, Thragg turns things up a notch and begins using his own freaking kids as weapons against Mark. He smashes 1 over Mark's head and 2 more across his face. Seeing this though, a few of Thragg's older kids begin to tear up as they watch their brothers and sisters die. While I think it's probably Ursula, the oldest one here, coming to her senses, she watches more and more of her brothers and sisters all die in front of her. Alan, Lucen, Robot, Craig, and even Space Racer are cutting through their numbers at an alarming rate. Not wanting to see all of her brothers and sisters die, she finally makes the decision to switch sides and asks that all of her family members do the same. Over with Mark and Thragg, the battle heats up literally and physically as they fight on the surface of the sun. I would go over the itty bitty details in more detail, but as I've said a few times throughout this video, I want to cover this fight in its own video in its entirety. So skipping forward, and after Mark gets the upper hand, pushing Thragg deeper and deeper into the sun with each punch, he pulls the Grand Regent in close before straight up biting out the dude's throat and pushing him away into the sun to slowly burn up and die. Moments later, Alan, who'd noticed Mark fly off with Thragg earlier, grabs his mate and boosts out of harm's way, even as his own skin starts to seemingly melt. Throughout the next issue, it goes into the aftermath and the consequences of the battle that just went down. Due to the injuries he received in his battle against Thragg, Nolan, who had been revived for a short amount of time, eventually passed on in a hospital bed with his son hugging him tightly. And yes, it is certain for this time. The amount of reviving in this series is just insane, but I'm glad I've gone through and captured all of the deaths in chronological order like this. Now if people, ever want to, they can come back here and see what happens to and how their favourite character. So the final death of the series isn't exactly a death in itself, because Bro's brain just ends up being put in a pod that allows him to only communicate through verbal commands. If you hadn't guessed it, it's Rudolph Rudy Connors, the 4,537,958,499th death in the entire series. What happens is that because Mark knows he's quicker than Rex's suits at their max speed, he grabs the dude and carries him all the way up into outer space where he can no longer communicate with his gear. So pretty much he's alone and just a human at this point. After a short conversation, Mark threw his hand forth, skewering the Ranger, killing him. But as I just said, his brain got stuck in a pot, so they can still keep his good ideas, but only through verbal communication. Bro can't start commanding an army and all that kind of jazz again. The most kills was Dinosaurus by far. I think he had probably a few million, just going off his calculations. He had 2.5 million in Vegas, and then with the entire global sea and everything, it was like 180 million or something insane. Bro had millions of deaths on his kill counter, so he definitely wins it by far, unless you want to go into detail and include Thaddeus, because technically he was the one that created the Scourge virus that killed billions of Viltrumites. But that there brings us to the very end of the video. I can't believe the death toll was as big as it is, but it makes sense when you think about just the scale of the series, the fact that it covers so many planets and a few of them are destroyed throughout it. If you think I've missed something or any death throughout the series, then let me know down below. I probably have missed some stuff, and the calculations on worldwide damage that I've done for some battles will probably be off, obviously, because I ain't no mathematician. That being said though, I've covered all of the major deaths here for the world of Invincible. If you have enjoyed the video though, then be sure to leave a like, as it shows that you all want more of these all death explained videos for differing series. Plus, if you are new around here, then subscribe, as it really helps out in pushing my content to a bunch of new amazing people. Become one of these amazing Patreon or YouTube channel members if you want to support me even further, but for now it has been your professional degenerate Diavolo, and I'll see you in a bit. Gonna cover Fire Force next, so look out for that. Bye.